Welcome, everybody. I'm John Santora, and this is the Virtual Leadership Academy Treasurer's Class 2021. I will go through introductions in a few minutes, but just to give you a sense of who I am, if any of you have taken this course before, I have been at JAD off and on for a number of years teaching this class, and as you can see from this slide, and if you have printed out the handout that I sent the link to, you'll have a sense of who I am and what I have done. What I'd like you to do, so that we can easily see on the screen, is to change your name on Zoom. If you are familiar with that, you can click the three dots that are up in the top right of your picture, and one of the options is to rename. And if you could rename your picture with your first name, the number of years you've been a treasurer, and your chapter name, that will give us an easy way to understand who's asking a question and what the level of experience is. So with that, we will this will obviously be a learning experience for everybody on both sides, teaching as well as learning. We want to answer your questions. That is one of the most important things that we can do today. So we do ask you to ask the questions in the chat. If you do have something that is just leaving you floundering and you have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about, then put a question or raise your hand, or using the Zoom function or whatever, and we'll try and monitor that. But I think if we can postpone the questions to the end of the halfway point, and then to the end of the session, we can get more accomplished that way. Let's start out by asking you individually to unmute and tell us a few things about yourself. Ron from the Tipica Notes, why don't you start?
Yeah, my name is Ron Baker. With the Tipica Notes in Lafayette, Indiana. Been a BHS member for about 14 years, about 3 years as treasurer, and boy, I've got a lot of grandkids that I adore and miss not hugging with the pandemic.
As we all do. Thanks, Ron. Steve from the Kentuckians.
Hi, I'm Steve Broderson. Been with Kentuckians since '09, and been treasurer for 1 year. I don't know, that's about it. Got an accounting background, but only in education. Got a degree, but I don't practice as an accountant, so gives me just enough information to be troublesome.
Okay, John from Independence.
Yeah, hi, I'm John Hawks. I've been doing the treasurer's position for about 3 years and course manager position for about 2 years. I joined in 2012. Don't have an accounting background. I learned QuickBooks helping with my wife's business starting about 5 years ago. Kind of continued from there.
Okay. Bud from Greater Cranberry.
Hi, I'm Bud Warner, in the Greater Cranberry, Pennsylvania chapter. I've been a member of BHS for approximately 16 years. I've been the treasurer here for 8 years. And one interesting thing about me is that I lived in Japan for 24 years.
Interesting. All right.
Unfortunately, no barbershop around me during that period of time.
Yeah, they do have a couple of clubs over there, but that's has been a relatively recent
Well,
occurrence.
they're down in the Tokyo area, and I was about 400 miles away. So
Ah,
it was
well,
a little too long to try to get to meetings.
okay. Um, Gary?
Gary Roth, Miami Shelby chapter. Years as years as a VHS member. This is my 50th year. I have been treasurer for 5 years, and I'm just a retired math teacher.
Okay, congratulations on 50 years. Doug?
Hi, I'm Doug. I'm a Dayton Metro chapter. I've been treasurer for a year now. I've been treasurers in other nonprofit organizations, but this is the first time for our chapter. And been singing with the chapter for, about 12, 13 years.
Okay. Jim?
Hi, I'm Jim Weath. Been with the Voices of Harmony for about 9 years, and I've been a treasurer for them for 4 years. Retired from the railroad. I worked as a conductor on the railroad, but I have some education in accounting, and I have also a tax practice.
Very good. Jess?
Hi, I am Jessica Virg, and I am with the Greater Kanawha Valley chapter. I've only been an official BH member for a couple of years, but I've been involved with BHS since I was knee-high. I'm not currently a treasurer, but I am learning the process of it to act as a backup to our current treasurer. So I'm just kind of trying to take everything in, and so that we have that.
Okay. We'll try to answer any questions you have today, since you and one other person are new to your positions, or at least new to the concept of the position of treasurer. Fred?
Hey, good morning. My name is Fred Watson. I'm with the Alliance, a 20-year member of the Alliance, 40-year member, or just shy of 40 years with BHS. I've been treasurer for about over 4 years. I sort of started midstream when a previous treasurer got a job transfer down to Texas, and so they needed somebody to step in. So my first year was kind of rocky since I did start with a LeadAc session to get me started. I'm a retired statistics professor, and I got my MBA, which is in the background, which gives me a little bit of accounting experience there.
The statistics professor. That explains the 7 decimal places in your tenure as treasurer.
Yes.
And finally, I think I've got everybody but Travis, so if you can give us your...
Sure. Good morning. I'm Travis. I'm from the Pittsburgh Metro chapter. I've only been a society member for going on 3 years now, and this will be my first as treasurer. One interesting thing about me is that I own a pet chinchilla.
That's interesting. Are they cuddly?
This one isn't. She's very temperamental, and likes her own space. She likes to snuggle on her time.
Sort of like a cat. That's interesting. Thank you. Okay, well, let's...
John, I'm sorry. Can I
Yep.
jump in on you real quick?
Sure.
Hey, I just want to say a few things to the guys. Hey, good morning, everybody. I'm Chris Foyse. I'm the district president here in the Johnny Appleseed district. And I just wanted to stop in and say good morning and thank you all for, number one, being chapter leaders and working hard on behalf of your guys and helping them do what we all love to do. And thank you for being here at LeadAc this morning. Unfortunately, this event marks the full year now of us not being able to gather in person. And I know for me, it's really, really painful. I want to be in Columbus right now. I want to be face to face with all of you. I want to be singing with you. And I want to be, doing all the things that we are used to doing as barbershoppers. But I do firmly believe that we will be back together this year. And it sounds as if it's going to be in the fall, and the way we are planning right now is to have a fall convention where we can all get back together and sing and have a good time again. But in the meantime, we are still working hard and planning virtual events. We do have a spring convention that we intend to have quartets in to record their sets, get some feedback, also have them available to submit to international to qualify for Cleveland. So we are still putting some things together and working hard to still have some fun things that we can do while we're still stuck at home. So if anyone has any questions for me, please go ahead right now. All right, guys. If there's anything that comes up, anything that you'd like to discuss with me, anything that you have an idea for a program we could do, please feel free to drop me a line, give me a call, send me an email, whatever works best for you. And I look forward to seeing you all again real soon.
Thanks, Chris. Okay, so I'm just going to briefly go through what we're going to cover. We're going to have 2 sessions this morning. Hopefully we can stay on track from 9 to, well, 9:30 to 10:30 or 10:45, and then take a 10 or 15 minute break, and then have a final hour for the second part. What I've done is I've organized this into going over very quickly, since many of you are experienced treasurers. We're going to talk about the chapter and the board structure within the chapter and your role on the board, and then get into the duties and when you do certain things throughout the year, and covering some very basic accounting and reporting concepts, specifically the social versus operating funds concept, and the differences in reporting to the various audiences that you have. We'll talk a little bit about incorporation, but that's really the venue of the chapter secretary, unless you have a payment that's required on an annual or other basis to maintain your corporate status. And then we'll also talk about IRS and state reporting issues. But the important thing is we want to answer, as I said earlier, we want to answer your questions and make sure that you get as much as possible out of this session. After the break, we'll talk about the financial review, which is the after-the-fact review by someone other than the treasurer of the finances and record-keeping of the organization, and how that is an important thing, and what's involved in it. We'll also talk about budgeting, and in the budgeting discussion, we'll talk about some of the issues that come up because of the pandemic and the strain that puts on chapter finances and operations, and how you can work with the chapter leaders to work through that. Every chapter has a different approach to that, but we can give you some pointers to that. We'll talk about the software that you're using. It looks, from the email that I sent yesterday, it looks like we have a mix of people who are using Quicken, some are using QuickBooks, and one or two of you are using Excel. We'll talk about the options, the benefits and drawbacks of each of those, and also give you some pointers on how to, if you're so inclined, how to acquire QuickBooks at a very, very cheap price. And finally, we'll talk about the resources that you have available to you, and there are a lot of things that we can't cover in the short time we have today, but the ability of the Harmony Hall staff to be available to answer questions about chapter operations. You have my email, so you do, and you have resources within your own district. You have, everyone on this call is a potential resource for everyone else on this call, in the sense that you may have experienced something that you can give advice to someone about. So let's get right into the issues. The important thing about the chapter board, from the perspective of the president, secretary, and treasurer, as an executive team, if you will, they need to work together. They need to understand what each other does, how they interact with each other, and how they interact with the chapter as a whole. Yes, they do have separate responsibilities, but they also have common responsibilities, and that is something that often we don't acknowledge enough, that we tend to live in our own silos. The secretary is concerned with membership issues, treasurers looks at the finance side of things, and the president sometimes becomes a micromanager, or sometimes maintains a fully hands-off approach, and neither of those are the right approach depending on the circumstances. The common responsibilities that the three positions have is essentially one of coordination among yourselves. You do have specific duties, but they need to be done in cooperation. The legal duties, in terms of compliance with in terms of compliance with the society rules and community, state and local issues, and even the corporation status, is something that is a shared responsibility. It's not just the treasurer that's looking after the state I'm sorry, it's not the secretary who's looking after the state and corporation status, and it's not the treasurer who's looking after the tax-exempt status, and you're all essentially responsible for the stewardship of the organization, the art form, and that will be a measure of success of your chapter when you do work with a common understanding of where you're going. So the president's role. The president's a leader, he's a communicator, hopefully he's a facilitator. He can be an arbitrator, and ultimately he's a steward. So those are the qualities of an effective president, when he knows what his job is, when he knows what the job of the people who are under him and report to him are, and he can work with them effectively to advance the purposes of the chapter. In terms of the secretary's role, many of you know this. The secretary maintains the corporate status, processes and updates membership information, works with the elections, agendas, and minutes, ensures copyright compliance, and we'll talk a little bit about that. There was a question that did come up already about ASCAP issues to that, and just maintains many of the issues that are related to the membership of the chapter. The question that came up in terms of the ASCAP, Fred, I think you raised this question. The chapter has not performed at all in 2020. Do we owe an ASCAP fee? And the answer to that is no, you don't. That this is specifically dealt with in the Secretary's manual, and if the Secretary is not aware of that, please refer him to that and understand that the ASCAP fee is only due in years that you have shows that you produced yourself. BMI is a little different because you pay those on a per show basis. So if you don't have any shows, you don't have any BMI licenses to get. So that's a little more clear cut than ASCAP. But no, the answer on ASCAP is that you do not owe anything if you did not have did not produce any of your own shows. Now the wrinkle to that is some chapters are actually providing shows or performances on social media. And that gets to be a very tricky and complicated area. The ability to use copyright songs and material on social media is very complicated, and I don't have all the answers to that. You can, if there are two venues that are important. There's YouTube, and there's everything else. For YouTube, the important thing is if you do not request YouTube to provide you with any of the revenue from the ad revenue that may be generated by your video on YouTube, if YouTube keeps all the ad revenue, then they are the ones that are responsible for the copyright clearance. And your chapter does not have any obligation to secure any further clearance of the video that you would put up on YouTube as an example of your performance. Any other form social media, Facebook Live, Twitter, Instagram, these are a hornet's nest of licensing issues, and it's probably better to stay away from those because trying to get the right answer and trying to get the right people that you actually have to make payments to is a tremendous undertaking and could be different for each song that you put up on such a venue. So YouTube is as you probably know, YouTube is the source that the society now uses to provide a whole host of barbershop performances to the general public. And that, again, the society doesn't realize any income from that, but on the other hand, doesn't have to worry about the licensing or copyright clearance payments that might be required because of that. So something to consider. It's a question that has come up to me quite frequently over the past 6 months about chapters that do want to put some kind of show together or at least performances or whatever videos they may have. And right now, the easiest way to do that is through YouTube. The treasurer's role is a number of different things, as you are all well aware, having been through that. Your primary role is as a bookkeeper, to keep the accurate records of the chapter and make sure that everything's in balance. You also have a role as a financial advisor, and this is primarily related to budgeting and more specifically even to long-term planning. We'll talk more in detail about budgeting in the second half of this presentation, but the role of the treasurer is not primarily the person who creates a budget. The treasurer compiles a budget from the information that should come from the people who are in charge of the various operations within the chapter. So the treasurer is not going to know how many pieces of music to buy, how many times you're going to have a coach come in, things like that. You need that information. So you're compiling a budget. You're not actually the source of information, and that's a fallacy that a lot of chapters operate under. That oh, it's the treasurer's job to create the budget. Not really. It's the information has to be valid and useful before the treasurer puts it all together for consideration by the president and the board. But we'll get into that in more detail a little later on. And the treasurer also has a role as a compliance officer in turn, not only for IRS and other agencies, but also just for general record keeping requirements. It really is an important element of the operations of the chapter to be able to maintain not only the legal side of the history of the chapter, but also maintain the financial side of the history of the chapter, and that is something that's the responsibility of the treasurer. So getting into the specific duties of the treasurer, again, many of you know this. I'm trying to go through this as quickly as possible. You pay the bills, you reconcile the statements, you maintain the information. You should have a records retention policy. There is a records retention section in the treasurer's manual. So you should be following that, keeping copies of invoices and contracts and well, we don't get canceled checks anymore unless they come as photocopies in your bank statement themselves. But keeping all of that information, so much of which is virtual information now, but it's not really a good idea to depend on just a virtual copy of an invoice or a contract or a bank reconciliation. We're still in the era where a hard drive crash or some other problem can wipe out records that only exist in digital form. So keeping paper copies, as much as we're supposedly in the 21st century and beyond that, is probably still a good idea, especially when you have a position like ours that's a volunteer position and you're potentially handing over records and historical records on not necessarily an annual basis, but maybe every 3 years, every 5 years, or whatever, and the person that you're handing it over to is not as computer savvy as you are, doesn't have the same type of software. So having the records in paper form, unfortunately, is still a good idea, even in this day and age. So let's So the final thing that's on this slide is the treasurer's duties regarding the social versus operating funds. And this is probably a new concept for at least the two people who are new to the treasurer's position. But I'm going to go through this very quickly, and if you do have questions at this point, it probably would be better to put your hand up or whatever and ask at this point. So let's talk about this distinction: social versus operating, or restricted versus unrestricted. The IRS has very strict regulations regarding how nonprofit organizations can use the money that comes from the general public. So we have sources of income for the chapter, and one of the sources of income is the public. Well, any money that comes from the public, whether it's show tickets, a grant that would come from an arts organization, that money is restricted and can only be used for the purposes, the mission purposes of the chapter. Things like buying music, paying a stipend to the director, bringing in coaches, buying risers, all the things that are necessary to provide the services that are in keeping with the mission of the chapter. You also may have donors, and their funds are also restricted, but they're not only restricted to the operating purposes of the mission purposes of the chapter, but they're also possibly restricted to what you can actually do with it. The donation may be specific to buying new risers or buying new uniforms or participating in a certain show. So that is another thing to be aware of. And finally, we have the source from the members themselves. And the members, the dues and any other money that comes directly from members are essentially unrestricted, not totally unrestricted. We'll get to that in a minute. But they're unrestricted in the sense that you don't necessarily have to use them for the mission of the chapter. They can be used for the benefit of the membership as a whole. The classic example of that is to throw a cast party or a Christmas party for the members, where the benefit to that is only among the membership themselves. You can't use any money that comes directly from the public for those kinds of activities. So looking at it a different way, if you look at the treasurer's manual, you'll see that there's a suggested chart of accounts in there, and this 300 series accounts or the revenue accounts that are listed here are restricted to the operating purposes of the chapter, and then those disbursement accounts handle the type of expenses that are related to the mission of the chapter. So you have the money coming in and staying in that pool of money that comes from the public and then being used for the purposes of the mission of the chapter. Then you have the money that's coming from the members themselves, and that is the unrestricted money that I mentioned previously. And that can be used for not only the member activity, but there's also, there's no restriction on using the money that comes from members, the dues, for what are called restricted purposes. They're not really restricted purposes, they're operating purposes related to the mission of the chapter. So you have this distinction where you have to segregate the money that comes from the general public and use it for the purposes of the mission of the chapter. But then you have the money that comes from the members that can be used for both purposes. And that's why this looks a little complicated and sometimes difficult to wrap your mind around. But the important thing is that the suggested chart of accounts does this work for you. As long as the revenue and expenses are properly classified according to the accounts that are in the chart of accounts, you can run a report in Quicken or Quickbooks, or you can even just sort things in Excel so that you can see how much money came in from the general public, how much money was paid out for the mission of the chapter, and you can keep essentially a running balance on what the restricted and unrestricted funds of the chapter are. You don't have to do this with separate bank accounts. Okay, that question comes up quite frequently as well. This can all be done with one bank account, and it can be done through the operation of properly classifying your revenue and expenses in the chart of accounts to keep them in the appropriate categories and be able to justify that you are in compliance with the IRS regulations in this area. I'll just stop at this point because I know this is usually something that when we do meet in person for these type of sessions, this is something that very often has quite a bit of questions around it. So if anybody has a question now, just unmute yourself and dive in.
Yes, I have this is Bud. I have a biggie. Due to the pandemic, we've got some members that can't afford to pay dues. How can we help them out? Can we use unrestricted funds?
That question comes up in almost every leadership academy. It comes up when there's a recession, and the pandemic is no different, really. The short answer is, unfortunately, no. You can't use chapter funds for the benefit of one single member. And even if you were trying to say, well, there's a class of members that have lost their jobs, the class of members doesn't relate to the mission of the chapter. For example, let's look at the flip side of that. Let's say you have a number of students in your chapter, and you want them to be able to compete with you at either district or international, and if international's a long way away, they can't afford to pay for the travel costs. Well, if you identify a class of members as students who need support to go to a convention, that's related to the mission of the chapter. And even if only one person is in that class or subclass of members, it still applies to potentially applies to more than one person. The problem with helping out somebody who's lost their job is that there's no connection to the mission of the chapter. Yes, we are a fraternal organization, but the mission of the chapter is to preserve the art form, to provide entertainment, to do all the things that we do as a barbershop chapter for the benefit of the general public. And assisting someone whose personal financial situation doesn't allow them to continue their membership is not something that the chapter can do under the IRS regulations. Now, what many chapters do is have a separate angel fund that is outside the chapter, and they have a couple of or many members who are willing to support these types of situations. But that has to be done outside of the chapter's finances. I know that's not the answer you want to hear, but unfortunately, it's the reality.
So we're talking about keeping it out of our bank account and keeping it out of the records that we have for the chapter, and it kind of like a slush fund.
Yes, that's. I mean, the money ultimately may come through the chapter if the dues, for example, are paid to the chapter. The money may come into the chapter and then out to the society and district, or the person, the finance aspect of it can be done through the society's membership renewal process. But again, that is, it's complicated. I grant you that, but there's no way to do that using the chapter's restricted funds or even unrestricted funds, because all those funds have to be in some way related to the mission of the chapter, and that purpose is unfortunately not related to the mission of the chapter. Steve, did you have a question?
Well, just to piggyback on that, we established a couple years ago a Helping Hands Fund, angel fund, if you like, and I currently it's only a couple $100 right now, but we have that in a separate fund called Helping Hands. It's in our account, but it's tracked separately from the other funds. It's technically in the 360 fund but it's a sub fund within that in my Quicken Quickbooks. But would that not be legal, or is that still illegal from the way you're planning it?
It's not the way you're supposed to do it, but if you keep, the thing is, there's, like everything else, there are gray areas here. And the gray area is what is the definition of flowing through the chapter, because that really is how the IRS regulations are written. So if money comes in to be used to pay a specific dues obligation, then whether that money comes from the person whose dues are being paid or whether it comes from somebody else, it doesn't really matter. But the timing of it is what you're talking about. You're talking about accumulating funds in anticipation of a need like that, and then using those funds at some point in the future for these kinds of purposes. And that's where you get into the potential of being afoul of the regulations, because now you have a portion of your bank balance that is potentially being used, when it is being used that for a purpose that is not in furtherance of the mission of the chapter. Is there a risk in doing that? Yes. Is the risk substantial? Probably not, given the size of our chapters. But I can't, as an advisor, I can't tell you that that's the way to do it. It's the IRS regulations, unfortunately, are pretty clear on this topic, and you know, you do have your own ability to do things the way your chapter wants to do them, but it's not something that, in my mind, would be in compliance with the IRS regulations.
Is there a safe, for lack of a better word, a better way to do that is legal, that is still allows us to manage those funds, to hold those funds for, we collect them specifically for that purpose. It's not something we siphon off. These are given by the members for the benefit of a member, to be named later, as determined by a subcommittee that approves the expenditure.
Yeah, unfortunately there's no way to do that within the chapter organization structure, with a chapter bank account or in the chapter's accounting. If one of the members of that subcommittee wants to open a bank account and specifically use that bank account for this purpose, that's entirely open, but you are essentially depending on the goodwill of that person to manage and make those resources available, not only for use but available for inspection on an ongoing basis. So it's something that you have to work through in your own chapter.
Thank you.
Fred, you have a question?
Yeah, good morning, John. This question on the new BHS program where folks can donate money and designate up to, I think it's 85% to come back to the chapter. When and if that money starts arriving, how do I consider that? Is that 340 money from the general public, or is that considered to be 360 money coming from members? It just came roundabout through the society.
It's actually 340 because what happened, or well, in the old days,
Yeah, okay.
in the old days when people could take deductions for charitable contributions on their personal tax returns before 2018. When you think about the fact that the person who made the donation to BHS or to Harmony Foundation took a tax deduction for that, that essentially clears the deck from the source of the funds. So Harmony Foundation, or BHS, is now the entity that is making the donation to your chapter with that donor choice money or the 85% or whatever it turns out to be. So the money that comes in from those sources are essentially restricted. and the reason they're restricted is because the person either took or could take a charitable deduction on their personal tax return for that money. The only way to get around that, and this is, I'm not aware of any charitable organization that's doing this, but there aren't many charitable organizations that have the kind of chapter structure that we do. If someone made a donate, let's say someone made a $1,000 donation directly to your chapter. Let's simplify it.
Mm-hmm.
If they said specifically, I don't want a receipt for this, you can use it for anything you want.
Okay.
Then it could go into the 360 account. But when you have that intermediary with BHS or Harmony Foundation, you don't know what you don't even know who the donors are. Well, you do know who the donors are, but you don't know the amounts that they gave.
Mm-hmm.
So now you have this layer between the actual donor and the payer of the money to your chapter, and it complicates things because the regulations are pretty specific that you can only use it as unrestricted funds with the direct permission of the donor. And since you don't have that direct connection to the donor, you have to default to the other position and say it's restricted.
So I guess so money coming in from the new BHS program, that would be 340 money. So, but you raised a question. When I started in 2016, took over as treasurer, the donor's choice money was coming into a 360 account. And are you suggesting that that needs to change now?
It should never have gone into the 360 account.
Oh,
It,
donor's choice. Okay.
Donor's choice should never have gone into 360. It's always been treated as restricted funds.
Okay. Well, I don't think we're in any problems with redesignating it, but it should always be a 360. I'll get that updated promptly.
340 should always be 340.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions on social?
Hey, John, do you have any other common class of members to be used for those kind of like the angel funds, or to not use the angel funds?
To work it through the chapter, you mean?
Yeah.
The example I gave in terms of students applies to almost any grouping within your chapter of members that can properly be associated with the mission of the chapter. So let's say that your chapter is 100 men, or men and women now, and you're going to international, and only 80 of those people are going to international. So those 80 people will have travel expenses to get to international to compete for the mission of the chapter. So if the chapter wants to give a stipend to pay for part of the airfare, part of the hotel cost, whatever, for those 80 people, it can be done. You can say there's a distinction between the 80 people who are going and the 20 people who are not, so that you can make a payment that applies to all of the people in that 80 group, as long as it's done equally. You can't pay more for a specific person than any other person, The only difference, the only exception to that is for someone who is actually part of the leadership structure of the chapter, whether it's music or administrative. So if you're going to pay the entire director's travel expenses, for example, to go to international, while you're only providing a small stipend to all the members, that's fine, because that's part of the cost of having the musical leadership of the chapter. The same thing applies to sending chapter leaders to to a leadership academy, and if it's a district like Mid-Atlantic, where you have 6 or 8 states, and you could be traveling hundreds of miles to go to a leadership academy, you may need to stay overnight, and the cost of that hotel would be a legitimate chapter expense, even though it's only for 1 or 2 or 3 people. So those type of things are legitimate exceptions, but the overall consideration is that the activity itself is related to the mission of the chapter. And that's where we run into trouble with paying someone's dues because they lost their job.
Thank you.
Okay. So, moving on then. There's a list of slides here which you have in your handouts in terms of what the ongoing duties are, and the most important duty you have is to report the financial status of the chapter to the board as often as the board wants to get that information. And this is something that I want to go over in a little bit of detail because the type of report you give depends on who the audience for the report is. So just consider that the purpose of a report is for your own records and for the person who will be doing the financial review of your chapter after the end of the year. Well, that's what we call itemized activity, and it's the lowest granular level of information available, and this is the level that basic record keeping needs to be done at, in order for the person doing the financial review to understand that the treasurer has fulfilled his obligation and fiduciary duty to the chapter regarding the receipt and payment of funds on behalf of the chapter. So that's one level. That's a check register. That's a transaction list. That's a deposit listing, a detailed listing of deposits. That's all of those types of transaction listings that are needed in order to understand what the ins and outs of the chapter are throughout the year. The second level is what I call a summary level of reporting, and that's to the chapter board and probably even to grant applications that ask for financial statements for the chapter. This is the income statement, what we normally consider as an income statement and a balance sheet. Almost all chapters in the society are on the cash basis of accounting, so their balance sheet is cash, checking bank balances, and members' equity, and that's essentially the only balance sheet issues. The income statement can be as brief as 4 or 5 lines of revenue and maybe 10 to 20 lines of expenses. If you do it in the broad categories of the suggested chart of accounts, or you could have sub-accounts under many different, if you have show income, you can have spring show, fall show, cabaret show. You can have all different kinds of sub-accounts under both revenue and expense, but it doesn't really make a lot of sense to provide that level of detail every month to every member of the board of your chapter. It's too much information. And the more information you give people, unfortunately, the more likely they are to ask questions about it. The classic example of that, I don't know if you've ever read books like The Peter Principle or the other professor who wrote something that's very similar to the Peter Principle. But there's a classic example of how boards of directors consider expenses, and there's this apocryphal story of the board of directors of a major utility making a decision to build a new nuclear power plant that cost over $1 billion, and made the decision in about 5 minutes. The next item on the agenda was what coffee brand would be used in the staff lounge, and that took 2 hours because everyone could identify with it. And if you provide detail to the chapter board about how much money the chapter is spending on its phone line, internet connection, even the amount of money you spend for gas for the riser truck, you're opening yourself up to those kinds of discussions at board meetings, which are totally counterproductive. So I'm not saying you're hiding anything from the board members, but understand that yes, you do budget at the level that we're talking about. You're budgeting for an internet connection, for gas, for riser truck maintenance, for all of those types of things. And as long as the budget and the treasurer and the president understand that the actual expenditures are within line of the budget, you can report to the board at a much higher condensed level than those individual accounts throughout the chart of accounts. So that is my recommendation when you're providing these monthly or quarterly, how often your board wants to see them. Don't do it at the transaction, definitely don't do it at the transaction level, and don't do it at a level that provides every single account in your chart of accounts. Try to create some kind of summary report. The other thing that's on the right-hand side here, the project income and expense summary, that's something that is very easy to construct in both Quicken and QuickBooks. Let's say you have a chapter show where you start selling tickets in October, but the show isn't until February. So now you have money that came in one calendar year, and all the expenses are, most of the expenses are in the next calendar year. And under cash basis accounting, that's totally appropriate. But the chapter board wants to know, did we make money on the show? So what you can do in both Quicken and QuickBooks is you can create a report that's restricted only to the accounts that are related to the show and only to the time period that covered when you started selling tickets and when you paid the final expenses for the show. So you can run a report from October through March or April covering only those expense, revenue and expense accounts, and you'll have a very concise summary of whether or not you made money from that show. So that's another useful tool to use in addition to the broad income statement that covers everything the chapter does in the specific monthly or annual time frame that's dictated by your fiscal year. And finally, in both the financial review that goes to the society, the copy that goes to the society, and sometimes even with grant applications, you can give them a very, very highly summarized income statement and summary of cash position. A lot of grant applications ask for audited financial statements, but we're such small organizations that it doesn't make sense, and usually a phone call to them will get them to waive the requirement for an audit, and they'll just ask for whatever your latest internal statements are when they understand that your budget is only $20 or $30 or $50,000 a year. So that generally, these type of internal statements that you give to the board can either be used for that purpose to support the grant application, or you may even provide a more condensed version and just show dues revenue, show revenue, grant income, and one or two other types of revenue, and then just again the 10 or so primary expense broad categories. So, but that becomes something that you kind of work through depending on even the individual grant, what the purpose of the grant is, whether it's to support basic operations, whether it's for a specific purpose like acquiring risers or new uniforms or things like that. So there are different purposes. The whole point of this slide is to show you that there are different audiences for reports and different types of reports you can give to those audience to give them the best information that is appropriate to their understanding of the finances of the chapter. So again, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time going through these slides because this is not only on the slides here, but it's also in the Treasurer's Manual. And I do want to get to some other more detailed information about the IRS, some IRS issues before we take a break. The most important month of the year is May, which is when the deadline for filing the 990 is, as well as filing the financial review to the society. So that is always a date to keep in mind. May 15th is a kind of a hard date that you need to be aware of and to work towards. Beyond that, the other most important date is probably the December timeframe, when you look at starting to prepare a budget, making sure that all the information is ready to be transitioned. If there's a new president, you'll need different signature authority with the bank, and a whole bunch of other issues that may arise at the end of the year. If you're lucky enough to have found your replacement as a treasurer, since that's usually the way things work, you'll have a transition that you will want to begin working with that new person before the end of the year. So that's prior to the end of the year is an important period of time. May is an important period of time. So let's just so that section was the treasurer's role as the bookkeeper, essentially. Now we're going to talk just a few minutes about the financial role as a financial advisor.
Doug has his hand up, John.
Yeah, Doug, sure.
So back on the 1099s, the IRS is no longer accepting fill-in-the-blank type forms.
I'm going to cover that.
You are, go ahead.
I'm going to cover that. Yeah, just, and that will be in about 3 or 4 slides. We'll get to that in a minute. So just as a financial advisor.
John, one more thing. Question from Fred about May 15th date. It
Yep.
was changed to July 15th this year. Do we think that's going to change back in 2021 or?
There's no indication from the IRS now, as of now, that they are going to do that. That announcement wasn't, obviously because of the pandemic, that announcement wasn't made until almost April 1st last year. I would expect if they are going to do something like that, that they would make the announcement shortly now-ish. But looking what they've done for the rest of the reporting deadlines in 2020, they didn't change any of them. The estimated payments were still due on September 15th, actually June 15th. They only postponed the April 15th to July, but they didn't even postpone the June 15th estimated payment deadline, and then the September deadline, and then the January deadline for estimated payments. So all they really postponed was the filing deadline of April 15th or May 15th for nonprofits on a one-time basis. Whether they do that again, just keep. We'll try and notify everyone through the chapter treasurer's mailing list if that occurs. But on the other hand, since most of the chapters have budgets that are well under $50,000, and the 990N is a really easy form to fill out, requires no financial information, there's little difficulty in meeting the May 15th deadline. So that's just my recommendation, is that even if they do postpone the deadline, if you have the ability to go online and file the 990N, just go ahead and do it as soon as you can. And that usually opens up around the beginning of February. So you can do that as early as February, and by May 15th is the normal deadline for that. Okay, so the treasurer's role as a financial advisor is to participate in the short and long-term planning, advise on the cost and impact on major projects and contracts that the chapters think, and really just to be a voice of reason and sometimes even a devil's advocate at board meetings. Just to make sure that everyone is considering not only the practical and operational considerations of the project or whatever it is that you're talking about, but also the financial implications, both short-term and long-term. The other important element as a financial advisor is helping the president prioritize the information that will be incorporated into the annual budget. The people who run the chapter, the music director, the music VP, the membership person, all of the people who run the chapter will have specific requests for spending money that will usually exceed the the resources of the chapter. Putting a priority on various requests is a difficult sometimes process, and the president ultimately will make that decision before providing a proposed budget to the chapter board. But the job of the treasurer is to help the president understand what all of those requests are, what the priorities have been in the past, and what the impact of prioritizing one type of expenditure over another could be based on the decision that the board might make. So that's an important process, important element of what the treasurer does as part of the budgeting process. Also, the treasurer may have to work with the secretary to maintain the corporation status. Many states only require a simple form to be filed on an annual basis, possibly listing the change in directors and things like that. Others require a payment. I don't know what the details are in your particular states, but your secretary should know that. And if a payment is required, he should be working with you to get that payment done on a timely basis. And that is essentially the treasurer's role, is to just make sure that that the secretary understands that if there is a payment required. So let's talk a little bit about the 1099 issue. We do have a brand new 1099 form this year, and I'll get to that in a few minutes. I just spoke yesterday with Harmony Hall, and they will be coming out hopefully within a couple of days with specific guidance on how to fill out the 1099, what resources you might have available to file the 1099 without having to hunt around for spare copies of those red forms that the IRS says you can't print from PDFs, unlike almost any other IRS form. The optical recognition technology they're using probably dates back to the 1960s, and those forms are built around that system for some reason. There are options. There are a couple of sources online, and this should be in the information that comes from Harmony Hall. You can go to a website, put in information specifically about your organization and the recipient of the 1099, and print out a 1099 for that person to give to that person. The 1099 will then be electronically submitted to the IRS by that service. Now, it costs anywhere from $2.50 to $5 per 1099 when you're only doing one or two of them. But when you consider the time and effort of trying to track down a CPA firm that has a supply of 1099s that they'd be willing to give you a few, and then also a 1096 for the summary, it's probably worth it to do to spend the $2.50 or $5 or whatever it is to file it electronically and not have to worry about the IRS side of that filing issue. But again, that guidance will come from Harmony Hall hopefully within the next couple of days. And if you don't see that, if for some reason the email doesn't come to you about that, send me an email and I'll give you some specific suggestions on how to do that on an electronic basis. So just let's go through the process of what you would normally do. When you're paying someone as an independent contractor, you have to have that person's social security number, or if they're a partnership, let's say a quartet on your show, they may have a taxpayer identification number as a corporate, not a corporate, but a partnership entity. So you would get either a social security number or this employer identification number from whoever you're paying. And the way to do that is on an IRS form W-9. This is not a form that goes to the IRS. This is a form that documents the person who you will be paying. You get this from that person with his signature on it, indicating that he is providing his Social Security number to you, and you are relying on his information about his Social Security number to provide information to the IRS. So this is a protection for your purposes to make sure that you are providing the proper information to the IRS, and they then are on the hook if they have given you an inaccurate Social Security number. So yeah, the important aspect of this is that you do need their full Social Security number. You keep this form on file for yourself. You don't send it anywhere. This is part of your records related to that independent contractor, whether it's the director or a quartet for your show or whoever. This is the old form, the 1099 Miscellaneous, and this is the 2019 form. You can no longer use this form for what's called non-employee compensation, payments to an independent contractor. There's a new form now, and it's called the 1099 NEC. And again, this is also one of those red forms that you cannot print on your local printer from a PDF file. But it is a new form. It's filled out very similarly to the 1099 Miscellaneous, and it just is something that the IRS is using now to segregate the information from independent contractors. This is mostly due to the gig economy with Uber drivers and delivery people working as independent contractors. The IRS wanted a specific form to capture the information related to to that type of compensation. And then again, if you do track down a 1099, you need to also track down a 1096, which is the summary form. Even if you only have one 1099, you still have to have the summary form that goes along with this. And then there's a new box on the summary form for the number of 1099 NECs that you have. Again, this is all taken care of by those services that are available online to prepare a 1099 for you. So this is hopefully something that you understand that there's a new requirement to provide a 1099 NEC, but the actual process of creating the 1099 and filing with the IRS can be done by a service at a very nominal cost, and is probably the better way to go for this. Any questions on the 1099? Okay. So at that point, it is 10:38. Why don't we take a 10-minute break now and come back, 12-minute break, come back at 10 to 11, and we'll pick up with the 990 issues rather than trying to push where I thought the break would be if we had actually started on time. So thanks for your attention, and see you in 12 minutes. And Fred, you have your hand up. Do you have an additional question, or is that from something previous?
Hi, John. No, that was just related to the director and the independent contractor question. I think that's going to be confusing, or potentially confusing. You know, in general parlance, most ordinary barbershop Joes and Janes talk about the directors being employed by the chapter. And is this just an example of where IRS has peculiar lingo as compared to general parlance?
It is. Nothing has really changed about the relationship between the chapter and the director. That relationship as an independent contractor has, for the most part, for almost every chapter that I know of, has been dealt with as an independent contractor. Otherwise, if you consider them an employee, you not only have all of the tax implications of withholding personal income tax and paying Social Security and Medicare taxes on the part of the chapter, but workman's comp and a whole bunch of other issues that arise if you are treating anyone as an employee. Treating a person as an independent contractor is the preferred way to go when you can. And the important distinction here is that the director is doing work for the chapter not only at the rehearsal on Tuesday night, but they're doing preparation work on their own time at their own timetable and doing work that is not specifically directed by the chapter. So the chapter is not telling the director that you're going to teach vowels A, E, and O this week, and you're going to teach these specific songs or whatever. The director has a degree of control over not only the content of what he's going to be teaching, but also the preparation of it. And the general rule of thumb is that for every hour you stand in front of a group teaching them, whether it's a classroom or whatever, you need at least 3 hours of preparation time for that.
Don't I know? Yep.
I know, I've been there too. So the fact that those 3 hours can occur at the discretion of the director is an important element of determining whether they are an independent contractor versus an employee.
Mm-hmm.
That help, Fred?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Yes, Jim.
My question is, or my comment to that is, as a employee of the organization, one would not be allowed to take business expenses as a deduction. As a non-employee compensation, you would be able to take business expenses against your income. So it has to do with being able to allow the chapter director to take those expenses that he would have, irregardless of whether he's an employee or a 99 non-employee.
That's true. Many chapters, in addition to providing a compensation to their directors, they'll also provide almost I'll call it a commuting allowance, but that's not really, that's the wrong word to use for IRS purposes. But let's say, the director has to drive 20 miles every week to the rehearsal. That's 40 miles a week, 1,000 miles a year, or whatever the math works out to. Well, that, as an independent contractor, if he is receiving a reimbursement for that from the chapter, then there's no effect on his compensation for that. But if he's not being reimbursed by the chapter, then that's a legitimate cost that he's incurring as an independent contractor versus an employee, because employees are not allowed to deduct commuting expenses. However, independent contractors can and are able to deduct travel expenses that are related to providing the services, even if they are provided at the same location week after week. So another important distinction. Okay, well,
Also,
yep. Oh, go ahead, Jim.
so the travel expenses are deductible to him there, but any of his other expenses, even travel expenses, would not be allowed for a employee, because the employee business expenses have been eliminated by the IRS.
That's true. The Schedule A deductions that used to be allowed for itemized deductions, not only have itemized deductions been severely restricted under the new law, but the employee business deduction element of that has been either totally eliminated or restricted. I'm not sure of the details of it. However, an independent contractor prepares a Schedule C, which is a profit or loss from a business. And by doing that, you have the ability to deduct a whole host of expenses that are related to the business you are in. Things like the cost, part of the cost of your cell phone, part of the cost of I wouldn't think you'd want to get into putting part of the cost of your house and things like that, but there are a host of expenses that are available that can be attributed or partially attributed to his role as an independent contractor and are legitimately deductible on a Schedule C as a sole proprietor of a business. So yes, that is another important distinction. Okay, let's just quickly go through the 990 aspect of your compliance issues as a treasurer. There are three types of 990s. There is the plain 990, which is for chapters that have gross receipts over $200,000, or if your total assets are over $500,000. Quick show of hands. Anybody in that category? I didn't think so. Okay. The next category is what's called a 990EZ, which is $50,000 to $200,000. And then there is the 990N, which is when your gross receipts are normally under $50,000. So let me just give you a quick definition of what gross receipts are. Gross receipts are usually all the money coming into the chapter related to not only the operations of the chapter, but also the dues and other aspects of the income of the chapter. Where there are two aspects of this that people sometimes get caught up on. The first is, well, what about the concept of pass-through expenses? And pass-through expenses are normally, when you think about this, if someone buys a registration to a district convention personally, they write a check to the district and they get their registration. Well, if the chapter wants to have everyone sit together and buy all the registrations at one point, the chapter will ask the members to pay the chapter that 30 or 50 or whatever the amount of money is, and then the chapter will write a check to the district for $500 or whatever it is for the number of registrations and give them to the members. So you have potentially this $500 or thousands of dollars of income coming in from the members if it was an international convention, for example, and you had 100 members going to international, you're talking about $20,000 potentially in terms of the registration cost. However, there's a concept in accounting and in IRS regulations that if you take money in for a specific purpose and it's paid out for that specific purpose, it is considered a pass-through transaction. The chapter is essentially acting as an agent on behalf of the individual to buy that registration, and therefore the money coming into the chapter is not considered gross receipts in those circumstances. Now, this for smaller chapters, this probably doesn't make much of a difference, but for some of the larger chapters who do occasionally go to international and their budgets are already in the $30,000 to $40,000 range, and they have this kind of a pass-through transaction where it adds another $20,000 to their receipts, they're potentially over the $50,000 limit. This is not the type of transaction that would push you over the $50,000 limit. So just to be aware of that, the best way to handle these kinds of pass-through expenditures is to run it all through the same chart of accounts account. Put all of the money that comes in into either a revenue or expense account, and then when you write the check to the district, categorize it to the same account that you put the receipts in, so that the account itself zeroes out as soon as the payment is made, rather than having offsetting revenue and expenditure accounts. That's the easiest way to handle these type of transactions. Some people carry that a little further than that, and they say, well, what about show revenue? You know, we sold $20,000 worth of tickets to our annual show, but it cost us $15,000 to put on that show. So isn't that only $5,000 of gross receipts? And the quick answer is no. The person who bought the ticket to your show is not paying $1.50 to rent the venue and 75 cents for the feature quartet and all the other itemized lists that it costs to run a show. They're paying $20 for a seat to enjoy the show. So that's the definition of gross receipts. You have money coming in to support an activity, and then you have expenses that are paid to support that activity. So that's separate revenue versus expenditures, and those are the total show ticket sales are included in revenue for purposes of gross receipts for IRS purposes. So the 990 or 990EZ or the 990N is going to be required. This is an important element of maintaining your status as a nonprofit organization. Your individual chapters are not separately registered with the IRS as a nonprofit. You exist as a nonprofit under the BHS umbrella group exemption. Yes, you have your own corporate status, you have your own taxpayer identification number, you are listed in IRS records as a nonprofit entity. When people do look up whether they are eligible to donate funds to your chapter, for example, you will show as a legitimate nonprofit organization. But the exemption comes about because of the group umbrella exemption of the society. So you have an obligation to provide information to the IRS and confirm to the society that you have done this, so that the IRS has current records of all of the chapters who are participating in this group exemption. That's an important issue. of the group exemption, but it's the individual chapters that have the responsibility to file these 990 forms on an annual basis. So if you don't do that, your chapter will be the entity that suffers the consequences, not the society. You could lose your tax exempt status if you don't file a 990 on a timely basis, and that's that May 15th deadline. And losing your tax exempt status could cause you to lose your charter as a society, and it's something that is very easy when you are under that $50,000 threshold to just get in the habit of doing as soon as the IRS opens the portal in February to go in and file the 990N if that is the level that your chapter is required to report on. So the 990, if you're over $200,000 in revenue, this is a beast. It's at least 25 pages long. The Society's 990 is about 80 pages, I believe. And even most districts' 990s that are required to have a full 990, it's usually in the 40-page range. There is the 990EZ for organizations that are between 50,000 and 200,000. A lot of districts qualify in that category. There are a handful of chapters that are in this category as well. And this is a smaller version of the 990. It's usually only about 12 pages, but it's a lot of detailed information. And if you do fall into that category, you probably do need help to fill out this form. Unless, Fred, I think you're the professional tax preparer, you may have a leg up on this. For most of us, though, the 990N, they call it an e-postcard, but it's not. It's an e-postcard because the information could fit on a postcard if we were still using the postal service. But the important aspect of this is that there's only 5 or 6 items of information, not pages, items. You're looking at the calendar year, whether the gross receipts are normally 50,000 or less, the name of the organization, who to contact, your employer identification number, and a website if you have one. This is very, very easy to fill out. You can do this online. It takes just a few minutes. You get an email confirmation that you have this. You keep it in your records, and you're cleared with the IRS for another year when you do this. One thing I want to go back to is you'll see that this says gross receipts are normally 50,000 or less. So let's say you do have a very successful show, or you do have a major donor who, or member, say, who left you a sizable amount of money in his will and unfortunately passed away. So you may have one year where you bump up significantly above 50,000, but if you were under 50,000 before that, you're going to be under 50,000 after that. Then you can still file the 990 as long as it's essentially a one-time occurrence or a very infrequent occurrence that pushes you over the $50,000. However, if you're at the $55,000 level and you've been at that level for years, then you are definitely in the 990 EZ territory and need to take that into consideration. So, continuing on with the IRS, since you're the treasurer of the organization, members might ask you, what expenses can I deduct on my personal tax return related to barbershop? and again, this was something that was more important back in the day when a lot of people itemized deductions. But there's still guidance in the treasurer's manual about the type of things that are deductible, and traveling back and forth to a regular chapter rehearsal is not a deductible expense for IRS purposes. Dues are not a deductible expense. But if you are traveling to a convention to perform, if you're just going to a convention to observe and be entertained, it's not deductible. But if you're going to perform, then the cost of travel and hotel stay and whatever for that convention are a legitimate deductible expense. Some chapters have made significant overseas trips in the past to Russia, China, Europe, and when individuals pay for the cost of that trip, and the sole purpose of the trip is to go and be part of the group that's entertaining in these various locations on their tour, then some, if not all, of the expenses related to that trip could be a deductible expense. Now again, this was something that was more important back in the day when charitable contributions were easier to itemize on your tax return. But it's still something, questions do come up about this even after the tax law changed. So there is guidance on this in the Treasurer's Manual. Look at that. If you have any questions on that, send me an email, or we can certainly talk about that offline if needed. The excuse me. The important difference, though, is in the mileage area, and what people, if they are going to itemize their deductions and take an itemized deduction, they could take, for these types of travel for purposes of performances and things like that, they could take the unreimbursed mileage rate of 57.5 cents a mile. The charitable mileage rate doesn't really apply because that is more specific to activities that are related to providing services, if you will, to things. And I'm drawing a blank on the distinction between the two now, but essentially it's the difference between providing a service or providing a gift, if you will, of your travel. And that is sometimes a little difficult to get your mind around. But the important thing is that sometimes people are reimbursed for travel. They're not reimbursed to the full extent. Many districts and chapters reimburse at 30 cents a mile, and have done that for a long time, because they consider that to be the operating cost of using a car, as opposed to the whole cost of the car and depreciation and things like that. So there are some distinctions for this, but the whole issue of deducting expenses related to barbershop on personal tax returns has been seriously diminished by the change in the personal itemized deduction changes. So again, the information is there if you need it, and just to make you aware of that. And as always, when people say anything about taxes, this is their own personal taxes situation, and everybody's situation could be different. So they need to get their own advice about what they plan to do. State issues related to compliance. Most states do not have an information return similar to the 990 requirement. I'm not aware of any that do. It usually is something that is tied into this aspect of it, which is a solicitation registration. For example, if your chapter decides to put a Donate Now button directly to the chapter on its website, then you are essentially soliciting from the public, soliciting donations from the public. And most states have regulations about registering with the state to be able to do that. And that may require either filing a copy of your 990 or filing a copy of your financial statements with the state and paying a fee in many states on an annual basis. So that is the only requirement that I'm aware of that may come into play that is similar to a 990 type of requirement for chapters. The other issue is that some states allow nonprofits and charities to be exempt from sales tax. And this is for sales tax that they pay for goods and services that the chapter acquires. Now, a lot of what the chapter pays for don't attract sales tax in the first place. If you're paying rent for a rehearsal hall, the money you pay for the director, the money you pay to coaches, and things like that, generally don't have sales tax attached to them. The things that have sales tax are the little things, office supplies, gasoline for the truck, maybe even sales tax on a new truck if you buy it. That's probably the biggest item that would ever be incurred on a sales tax basis that you could potentially avoid. So the individual states, as I said, have different requirements or allowances for sales tax exemptions, and they are a very variety. Some require annual reinstatement. Some are a one-time registration. Some are for multiple years, and it's sometimes the process. I don't think it ever requires a fee to be paid, but sometimes the process can be pretty convoluted. And if it's something that needs to be done every year, you need to compare that to the savings, the potential savings, if it's only in the tens of dollars throughout the course of a year. Is it really worth it to try and maintain that type of sales tax exemption? I'm not sure in your states whether that. I think in Pennsylvania, I think it's pretty easy to get and to maintain because we do in my Mid-Atlantic district, we do have Pennsylvania chapters, and they've told me that it is a relatively easy process in Pennsylvania, but I don't know about your other states.
John, I don't know if you've answered this question. There was a chat asking about PayPal pass-through donations and how those play out.
So the PayPal Giving Fund, I'm not familiar with the PayPal Giving Fund. Is that, are the sources of that, you know who made those donations?
John, the way it works is you register with them as a nonprofit, they verify that, and then they collect the donations for you, and they're the ones that provide any uh, confirmation or whatever back to that contributor as far as reporting, the donation. We get the money as one check. I can see on the website who donated what, but it's not anything we're responsible for reporting back to that person with.
Yeah, well, since PayPal is the one that's giving the confirmation to the person, it's very similar to the donor choice situation, where the person making the donation has the ability to deduct that as a charitable contribution, whether they do it or not, and that really is the consideration. Again, working through a third party like PayPal is the same as working through Barbershop Harmony Society or Harmony Foundation, and putting an additional layer between the donor and the chapter. So I would consider those. It's not a pass through. Pass through is not really the right word to use for this. I think it's a question of whether it's restricted or unrestricted, which is the discussion we had around the BHS and the Harmony Foundation
These are
gifts.
restricted funds. They actually mandate that
Yeah.
in their rules. But my
Mhm.
question is back to the donate now button issue of, do I have to register with the state or whatever, or consider that, since this is going through a different organization, it's not coming directly to us, but it is something they select on our website.
That is a good question. I don't believe so, because you're providing a link to another organization who is providing that information to the states about the solicitation issues. I don't believe that's the case, but that's something that I'd really have to look into further. I unfortunately don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
I don't believe it's required for you to have that to require you to register for solicitation because you put the PayPal link on your website, but I'm not 100% sure of that.
And just as a point of information for everybody, the difference between that and a normal PayPal donation is that they don't take any funds out of that. We get 100% of those funds that are donated by the person. So I guess they get credit for the donation or whatever. I don't know how it works for them, but it is a direct, if somebody donates $100, we don't get $100 less fees. It's straight to us $100.
That's interesting. Okay, well, as I said, I don't know the answer to that. I can make a note of that and try to get a better answer on that. But at this particular moment, I'm not familiar enough with that to give a definitive answer on it.
That's fine. I'll check into it as well. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so this was the point that we were going to stop, but anything up to this point that anyone has questions on? I know you've been asking questions in the chat, and we've hopefully been dealing with them. So let's, yes, Doug.
So when we did our corporate filings years and years ago, we were Dayton Metro chapter of SPEPSQUA. And so that's our corporate name, and I think it's still the corporate name for the international also. But when do we use the doing business as name, the BHS name, as far as the IRS filings and so on?
Well, the IRS, if we go back to the okay, so you can see here that it says name of organization and then it says DBA after it, and it gives you 2 lines to do that. So you can actually put both on this. The official name of your chapter, unfortunately for IRS purposes, is Society for the Preservation and Encouragement of Barbershop Quartet Singing in America, Incorporated, comma, Dayton, Ohio chapter. That is the official legal name, and sometimes because the IRS had truncated fields over the years, they would hash that down to SOC for PRES and ENC and all of this type of things. They'd compress it down so that it would fit into the 80 characters or whatever needed to be fit. But you can put whatever that listing, the legal name is, which is on your charter and on your incorporation documents, you can put that on the top line, and then on the second line you can put whatever you accept checks as. You know, if you accept checks as a Dayton, Ohio chapter, you know, whatever your chorus name is, you know, my chapter is Patapsco Valley, Maryland chapter, so we accept checks to Patapsco Valley chapter, Heart of Maryland chorus, even just PVC. It all depends on the relationship you have with your bank and what you have registered sometimes with the bank as your DBAs. You don't necessarily have to register a DBA. The good thing about having a DBA on your 990 form is that it is, in some circumstances, and I don't fully understand this, but it is in some circumstances searchable, so that if somebody puts in Heart of Maryland chorus, there is a way that they can find the record of my Patapsco Valley chapter, but that doesn't always work. And you're better off using the employer identification number when you know it to try and search for proper nonprofit registered entities. And that's why the employer identification number is required to be part of any receipt that you give to a person for a charitable donation, so that they can double check if they want. Well, actually, in their charitable contribution, when they file their itemized deductions, if they take a charitable deduction over $250, I think, or they are required to give the employer identification number of the charity that they gave to. So it's the DBA is not a legal term for your chapter, but it is something that is recognized as an alternate for the full legal name of the chapter.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so what we covered most of everything that was in part one of the presentation. What we're going to talk about now are the financial review, budgeting, Quicken and Quickbooks, and then a couple of other miscellaneous things. And hopefully we will do that in a half an hour. The financial review is first and foremost, it's not an audit. I'm a CPA, and the word audit has very specific connotations for how a CPA deals with a client and the type of report that they can give on the client's financial statements. This is not an audit. It's not even technically a financial review, although we use that term loosely for this process. That's also a defined term in the accounting and auditing literature, but I won't go into that in much detail because it is understood that it is a non-technical term as well. So what should a financial review cover? The thing about a financial review is that you want to give the chapter board some comfort that the finances of the chapter are being handled in a professional and appropriate manner. And the way they do that is they look at the bank reconciliations, they look to make sure that payments are made on a timely basis, that you have supporting documentation on file for most of your important expenditures, and that you're sticking to the policies and contracts that you have. If you have a contract with your director, are the payments to that director in accordance with the contract? And then overall compliance with the budget. And whether or not the files are organized properly to give information to whoever's doing the financial review. So the person doing the financial review should not be a member of the chapter board in the year that's under review. So if somebody was on the board in 2020 and you're looking to have the review done for 2020, it can't be someone who was on the board in 2020. It can be another member of the chapter. It could be another fellow treasurer in another chapter. It could be the wife of a member or husband of a member nowadays who would be able to provide this kind of service. It's not something that you actually have to have a lot of experience in accounting or bookkeeping to be able to do this. It certainly helps, but there's a checklist that's available on the Society website on how to do a financial review, what it entails, and what the report looks like. And it's very simple to follow. So this can really be done by almost anyone with a basic understanding of numbers and transactions. And the important thing, again, about a financial review is that it's one of the requirements of the BHS relationship with the chapters to upload that report along with the 990 receipt, as well as confirmation that your incorporation status is active, and do that on an annual basis through the member center. This is not. A lot of people don't comply with this, and the question often comes up is, well, why do you make us do it if you don't? If a lot of people are not complying and you're not enforcing it. Well, the role of the society here is to guide the chapters to the proper actions that they should be taking. So the reminders to the chapter are to make sure that you do file your 990 with the IRS, because that has serious repercussions. The society does remind you to make sure your incorporation status is active, because that has serious repercussions if it lapses. The financial review has ramifications to the chapter in the sense that if the treasurer doesn't have some oversight on a regular basis, that there is the possibility for something going off the rails. That rarely happens, but you want to give comfort to the chapter board that there is oversight to what's happening with the treasurer and the financial functions. The important thing about this is that the society has as I said, a role to inform the chapters about their role in complying with the various IRS regulations. The BHS is not the enforcer of those situations. So if you choose to comply with the IRS regulation to file your 990, but not upload the receipt to the society, there's no ramifications to the society for that. However, it is it's something that it makes it difficult, I'll say, for the society to continue to certify to the IRS that there are 650 chapters or whatever the number is that are existing under this umbrella when the society is only receiving confirmation from 300 or so of those chapters that they have actually complied. The BHS gives an annual list of the employer identification numbers of the chapters to the IRS. The IRS checks to make sure that 990s have been filed by all those entities. But it's well after the fact that all that is done. It's as I said, the role of the society is to encourage compliance with the various IRS and state regulations that the chapter needs to be in compliance with, not to actually enforce that compliance. And it's an important distinction to understand. So let's move on to budgeting. Why it's important? It's something that in ordinary times, the budgeting process is really important because it allows the chapter to have input and ownership by the people who are running the various aspects of the society, of the chapter, whether it's the music side, the administrative side, the membership, whatever. Those people are providing the information for the budget and then are responsible for managing the budget throughout the course of the year. Budgeting prevents surprises most of the time. I mean, you can't avoid having a bad showing, bad ticket sales for an annual show if that wasn't predictable. But it usually prevents surprises like that, and it usually involves long-term planning. So the role of the treasurer, and I've said this before, is compilation, not preparation. The treasurer is not the source of information about the budget. The treasurer gets information from the music director, the music VP, the membership director, the president, the secretary, all of the functional people within the chapter who have responsibility for the various areas, and to say, we are going to buy 10 new pieces of music. We are going to have 3 coaches in throughout the course of the year. We are going to compete. We're not going to compete. All of these decisions that have financial ramifications, all of that information is given to the treasurer, and the treasurer then compiles that information and presents it to the president, and then collaborates with the president to prioritize the various revenue and expense elements of the proposals that have come in, and then the president and the treasurer formalize a proposal budget to the board for approval. So that's the role of the treasurer. It's if your chapter is relying on the treasurer to be the source and only creator of its budgets, that is not the proper way to do things, and you should look at putting in a system that changes that to make the people who are actually spending the money responsible for managing the money. Yes, the treasurer does provide the reporting, the actual versus the budget on a monthly or quarterly basis, whatever, but the creation of the budget and the collaboration with the president in terms of prioritizing the budget are very important considerations for that. You know, questions have come up with the pandemic in terms of how this affects chapters' budgets, and it's obviously for some chapters it's been a horrific experience, not only from an operational point of view, but from a financial point of view. Others not so much. Many many districts, for example, have been losing money on their conventions for years. So not having conventions is actually a good thing for some districts in the past year, horrible as that sounds. Some chapters have a significant amount of reserves. My chapter has about a $24,000 annual budget, and we have about $30,000 in the bank. So we've been relatively unscathed by the pandemic. We're meeting on Zoom every other week, but it's taking a toll, as it is on everyone, by not being able to get together. But it affects chapters differently depending on the obligations you have, whether you are whether you are required to continue to pay for a venue rental that you can't even use for your rehearsals, whether you're continuing to pay your director, depending on what he's able to do and accomplish via Zoom versus in person. There are so many considerations that have arisen because of the pandemic that are truly outside what anyone has considered. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of guidance that we can give in this area other than to say that be as collaborative as you can with the chapter board and the organization as members as a whole in trying to work through this. Encourage your members to renew their membership when it's at all feasible with their personal financial circumstances, because this is going to be over. It's lasted a lot longer than we ever expected it to, but there are vaccines now. There is light at the end of the tunnel. We probably will be resuming physical meetings sometime around the middle of this year, hopefully by the fall at the latest. And we'll be back to a normal convention schedule either in the fall or in 2022. So the ability to survive, I guess, is what you should be looking at, and how you do that, whether your chapter has adequate reserves to draw on, or whether you're going to be asking the members to support the chapter a little more heavily than they may have in the past, because you don't have show revenue or any of the other sources of revenue that comes from in-person performances. It's a difficult time. It really is. And unfortunately, the circumstances are so different among the various chapters that it's hard to say, here's what you should do. It really is an unfortunate situation. And if you have ideas, if you have things that you're not sure of, and you want to try and incorporate in your chapter, but you're not sure how they fit in, or you're not sure how it would be received by the members or whatever, talk to someone. Talk to me. Talk to someone at the society about this, because we do have support. We've been offering support in the live wire with chapter administration, Healthy Chapter Initiative, I think it's called, support for the chapters, and that involves a broad range aspects of chapter operations, not just music, but also administrative, and also in helping with the pandemic-related issues. So budgeting, again, is under best of circumstances, it can be a trying process to get the cooperation of everyone involved. It's much harder now with the pandemic, but realize that it is a temporary situation, just like you know, sometimes some chapters have had you know, annual shows canceled because of a hurricane or a tornado or something along those lines. So this is obviously a far more impactful, longer term development, but it is a sort of akin to those types of situations that chapters have dealt with to some degree or other, lesser or greater, well, probably not greater, but to a lesser extent over the years and in their operations. So, there are a couple of things here. I won't go over into any more detail about this, but I will say the budget is not, once you create a budget in December or January for the year, it's not cast in stone. If there's a reason to modify it, and 2020 was certainly a reason to modify a budget in March, if there ever was one, modify it when it needs to, based on the circumstances, but usually only do that for major things. Don't modify it for every time the phone bill changes or, you know, minor details like that. So, moving on to the software that you're using. I saw from the information that you sent me by email, and by the way, thank you for everybody for responding to that email and giving me the information that I asked for. We do have a variety of people who are using Quicken, QuickBooks, a couple of people using Excel, and I just want to give you some basic information here. You know, I think you all understand the reason why we would use software as opposed to pencil and paper, or even Excel to a certain extent. It gives you the classification ability, and it gives you the ability to easily prepare reports on the information that you have. And it's also a method to create easy backups for that information. But Quicken has been the go-to software recommendation for chapter treasurers for quite a number of years now, almost the entire time that I've been teaching these courses, which is getting close to 20 years now. The thing about Quicken, though, is it still the right software to use? And should I upgrade to QuickBooks? And when people hear, oh, QuickBooks, that's hard to use, it's for businesses, we're not really a business, we're just a small chapter. Quicken works fine for what we're doing, and so there can be some resistance to moving to QuickBooks. However, let's look at the two of them side by side. The pluses of using Quicken are certainly it's simple to learn, especially when you have a position like a treasurer where it's going to transition from year to year, possibly, and new people have to come on board and that may not be as proficient in using software. It has limited reports, but it is capable of usually putting the chapters, satisfying the chapter's needs. The minuses of Quicken now is that they have moved to an annual subscription model only. You can no longer purchase the software and use it for 13 years, as I think one person that responded to me is using Quicken 2007. I'm not sure how that's still being able to run on a modern PC, but that was the case. You could use the software indefinitely when you purchased the desktop version of it. Quicken no longer offers a desktop version. They only now have a subscription model. Quicken is essentially single entry bookkeeping. You record a deposit or you record a check. Yes, the other side of it is to cash, but there is no element of the normal checks and balances of double entry bookkeeping that are in this product. And if you do, for whatever reason, want to have some type of a modified accrual basis accounting, say to record the value of risers or uniforms in your balance sheet for just reporting purposes, not necessarily for IRS purposes, it's a little difficult to do that. And one of the most important things about Quicken is that it has no audit trail. That means that you can go in and put a transaction in today, and then 6 months from now go in and change that transaction, and there's no indication of what the original transaction was, when you changed it, how you changed it, and that is a really strong detriment to financial accounting and accountability, and something that a financial reviewer has no way of knowing after the fact whether something like that has occurred. So the pluses of QuickBooks are that it still has a desktop option. And we'll get to that in a few minutes. You can do it on a subscription basis, just like Quicken, but it does still have a desktop version that's available. QuickBooks is true double entry bookkeeping, and you can use accrual or modified accrual basis to your heart's content in any type of transactions that you want to report on. It has an audit trail. So once you enter a transaction, if you want to change that transaction, the only way you can do it is by entering another journal entry that takes it out of the original account and puts it into the new account. And that means that there's always a trail of what happened originally, how the change was made, when it was made, and where the new information went to. Quicken also prepares 1099s for you, 1099s for you. You can print a 1099 directly from the software, and you can file the 1099 with the IRS through the service that Intuit provides for the people who are users of QuickBooks. So that's another potential savings or convenience for that. And there's a variety of reports that are relatively easily customizable in it. Yes, it does have a learning curve. It's not as steep as many people fear, but it is a learning curve compared to Quicken. The thing is that there are templates on the Society's website for both Quicken and QuickBooks. And if you are inclined and are not a QuickBooks user, you can get a trial version of QuickBooks. You can download these templates and sample files, and you can look at them and see how it may work for your chapter. So, looking at the costs of the options, as I said, Quicken is now only an annual subscription model. It's either $40 to $45 a year. You have to use the deluxe version, not the starter version. You don't need any of the advanced versions of it, but even the deluxe version is $40 to $45 a year, and you have to pay that every year. The advantage to it is that it's always up to date, and you never lose the ability to download transactions from your banks if that's what you do. So that is the advantage of the subscription model that Quicken has moved to. QuickBooks, on the other hand, has both an online and a desktop version. The online is a subscription model that can cost anywhere from $150 to thousands of dollars a year, depending on the users. The desktop version is usually about $650 a year, which is pretty far beyond the means of most chapters. However, you can get a desktop version of QuickBooks from an organization called TechSoup.org. Sounds strange, but that's the website, TechSoup.org, and you can get a desktop version of QuickBooks for $60. And that desktop version will be good for at least 3 years in terms of having the ability to download transactions from your bank, get feature upgrades and bug fixes for at least 3 years with that $60 fee. So QuickBooks is actually possibly less expensive than Quicken now, unless you already have a version of Quicken that dates back to about 2017 that you can still use, but is no longer being kept up to date in terms of bug fixes. Let's go back to that. What is TechSoup? Most people have never heard of this. TechSoup is a website that provides software to nonprofit organizations, and this is a screenshot of their website that shows that QuickBooks Premier 2021, a one-user license, including the nonprofit edition, is $60. That's a full version, full access to all the features of QuickBooks for $60. You only have to register. There is a registration process. You have to go to TechSoup.org. You have to enter your chapter's employer identification number and provide some other information about justifying that you are a nonprofit organization, which is very easy to do. And it allows you to have access to a number of different software vendors, Microsoft being one. You can get a version of Microsoft Office for about a $65 fee, I believe. So again, this is something that your chapter should be taking advantage of, and is something that if you're interested in making the jump from QuickBooks to QuickBooks, you can do it at a very, very reasonable cost to your chapter. So getting back to QuickBooks, how hard really is it to learn? That's the complaint that many people have, that it's overkill for my chapter, and in many ways it is. But you have to realize that QuickBooks is actually based on the same user interface type as Quicken, for the most part. The registers are exactly the same. The reports, creating reports and modifying reports are very, very similar. And the operation of the software is very similar. Yes, they look different when you first go into them. You know, the home screen of Quicken is this very condensed pie chart of your finances. The flow chart for QuickBooks makes it seem a bit daunting. But when you look at the flow chart, you're really only looking at that lower quadrant where it says record deposits, reconcile, write checks, check register, print checks. That's the same type of information that you had in Quicken. So once you get past that, it really is very easy to work with compared to many other software, accounting software packages that I've used over the years. And believe me, I've used a lot, and they can be a bear to learn. The chart of accounts, Quicken versus QuickBooks, you can see that it's almost exactly the same type of report, type of activity. The reports look very similar. So creating the reports, you can see that you have the ability to customize the reports here, the same as you do in Quicken. So, there's plenty of support available, for both, the Quicken for Dummies or QuickBooks for Dummies books are actually very, very good. There's actually more information available for QuickBooks if you want to delve into more of the understanding of it. I know we're getting down to the end of our time here. I just wanted to cover a couple of other things. And the role of the treasurer is in fundraising and grant writing. The important thing about grant applications, is that you need to follow what the requirements of the application are. Make sure you understand who the organization is that is offering this grant, what their purpose is, and how your mission fits into their purpose. That's how the grant should be written. If it's not, then you're not going to be successful. You can't say that we need to buy new risers. You need to say that we need to buy new risers because we perform in front of nursing homes and a variety of other community organizations that are supported by your foundation or whatever it is that you're seeking a grant from. So you have to be able to provide that context of how your mission fits into the mission of the organization that's providing the grant. As I said before, these usually call for audited financial statements, but for small organizations, that's usually very easy to waive, and they just want a simple balance sheet and an income statement. Fundraising and grants are something that many chapters don't take advantage of. Each state usually has an arts organization, and many counties even have arts organizations that have a simple application process. My chapter's been getting a $2,500 a year grant from our county arts organization for about 10 years now, and sometimes it's a convoluted process if you're dealing with a new person on the other end, but it's usually pretty straightforward, and it's essentially unrestricted money in terms of using it for, obviously it's restricted to the chapter's mission, but it's unrestricted as to specific purposes for it. So there's that possibility. You should be looking into that as much as possible. However, the treasurer shouldn't be relied on to be the source of fundraising activity and the person to be in charge of grant writing. Those can be particularly onerous volunteer jobs, and if you're willing to take that on, great, but it shouldn't be assumed that that's part of your job, and have a serious discussion with your chapter president if that is the understanding in your chapter and you're not willing to take that on, because it can be a serious time commitment to do it properly. The final thing is sort of what we didn't cover. The chapters are provided insurance coverage through the society. There's required coverage, which is general liability insurance, and then there's optional coverage that the chapter can sign up for but could also not opt into, and that would be property insurance for things like risers and things like that. You get information from the society generally toward the end of January, early February. There'll be a flyer with insurance information, how to sign up for the optional coverage, what the required coverage is going to cost, and so that information will all be coming to you from the society in a relatively short period of time. So we're not going to go into a lot of detail about that here beyond that. And finally, I just wanted to make sure that you're aware of the resources that you have available. You need to understand what the chapter bylaws allow and don't allow in terms of the operations of the chapter. That's something you work with this chapter secretary on. And just the source of information, the minutes and newsletters of the chapter. As I mentioned, the Treasurer's Manual and exhibits that are available on the Society website, the Healthy Chapter Initiative support through customer support at barbershop.org is always available. Your district treasurer and even your fellow chapter treasurers are always a good source of information if you're doing something that seems new to you but probably isn't new to other people. Ultimately, the BHS CFO, Eric Dove, is certainly available, but I'll tell you, if you send an email to Eric Dove about a chapter operation issue, it's probably going to come to me. So just email me directly. You have my email address on the emails that I sent yesterday and this morning. That pretty much brings us to what I want to cover, and I'll stay here as long as you have questions and help you work through them.
Before we jump into questions, John, I have misplaced the link for the post-class survey. Can you forward that to me? I'll put it up in chat, please.
I certainly will. And Fred,
and I know there was. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yep.
Yeah, there was a question in chat we didn't get to, and then if you can walk through them now, you can see Fred might have had a question. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, Fred, why don't you take your question first?
All right, John, this was back when we were talking about financial review. I've been looking at the Healthy Chapter documents, and unfortunately, the Member Center has been down all week, so I don't have the latest and greatest, perhaps, copy. But the Healthy Chapter for annual review, financial review, talks about having canceled checks, for example, and that is just something that our bank just doesn't provide anymore, and they don't even give us copies on the bank statement.
Well, then the answer to that is that you probably should be using, if you haven't been using already, the two-part check forms.
That I do have. Yeah, that we do have for the past 10 years. We've had those two-part forms.
Yeah.
That's the only record we have available to us for that.
And I understand that, and that's in this day and age, unfortunately, that's what we're going to have to rely on. The thing is that it's like a receipt book for money coming in. You're required to put information in there in sequence, so it's very difficult to put a transaction in after the fact when you didn't write a check and have a check number that's going to show up on your bank statement. So the two-part, whether it's a carbon copy or NCR copy of the check, or whether it's just a check stub version of those two-part checks that many, the old business way of handling those. That is what it's the only option you have, really. I mean, you could take a photocopy of the check after you write it, but it's not a canceled check.
Right.
The only thing the important thing is to maintain the sequence, and that's what the check stubs or the carbon copies of the checks do. It shows the person reviewing the information that the sequence was maintained throughout the year and conforms to what the bank is reporting.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay. The question was asked about how degraded is the Mac version of QuickBooks compared to the PC version. I haven't looked at the Mac version since 2016. I know the reporting capability, and I have the 2021 version of QuickBooks for PC. I'm not totally familiar with what is there and not there at the current time, but the reporting capability was severely limited compared to the PC version, and even simple things like connections to banks are not as robust as they are in the PC version for whatever reason. Intuit has never given the Mac version of any of their software the same love that they've given the PC versions. Quicken's the same way. Quicken for Mac is almost unusable compared to the PC version. So it's possible that it's usable for the Mac version, but like I said, I use a Mac myself, but I haven't looked at the Mac version since the 2016 version, and at that point, I was not recommending people to use it compared to the PC version.
Is there any kind of a template or a trial, anything you can do with the TechSoup version that would be able to investigate that?
I am not aware of, well, there's certainly no trial available directly from TechSoup. There used to be a trial available directly from Intuit, but I'm not familiar with that. Hopefully there is. I should have researched that because I know there was at one point. I actually had I think the Mac version that I investigated in 2016, I did that on a trial basis. So at one point they were allowing a trial, and it may involve, a small subset of transactions or whatever, but I would go to the, QuickBooks, the Intuit website, and look and see if a trial is available, as opposed to TechSoup, because TechSoup you can only actually purchase it there.
Yeah, we have a subscription now with QuickBooks for $25 a month, but it doesn't allow budgeting. So you can't do a manual budget report on Excel to do that, which is a little bit of a pain.
Yeah.
We could get that $60 rate for 3 years would be a big thing. It's $300 a year.
Yeah, that's the thing. Even TechSoup, I think, even has some kind of a discount on the subscription versions, but it's not nearly. I think all it does is it gives you you pay a small, maybe $10 fee to TechSoup, and then you pay $10 a month for the first year, but then it goes back up to the 25 or whatever it is beyond that. So the subscription savings through TechSoup are nowhere near the savings that are available on the desktop products.
Question, John. Does if we look at changing from Quicken to a QuickBooks, is it easy to download the existing register out of Quicken or use the backup copy to then upload into QuickBooks and get started up that way?
Yes, there's an import feature in QuickBooks that you can take a Quicken backup file and import it directly into QuickBooks. The only thing that it doesn't import are any of the memorized reports that you have set up. You have to go back in and recreate whatever profit and loss, actual versus budget, that are specific to your requirements. Now, QuickBooks has a lot of standard, much higher number of standard reports that are probably satisfactory for your needs. And all you need to do is just customize the date range or the columns that are shown. So it's much easier to use, although you do have the capability of creating memorized reports. It just doesn't import the details of those memorized reports from Quicken. But it does import the chart of accounts. It imports the vendors, all the registers, the transaction history. It brings everything over.
Okay, that's really useful. I mean, that'd be a very useful place to start.
Yeah, what I can do is I can just show you very briefly if I unshare that screen and then show you. Oh, where did did you go, people? I've lost my Zoom screen now. Okay. Sorry about that. So now if I okay, so you are now actually looking at, or should be looking at, the QuickBooks start screen and this is actually in Windows. Even though I'm on a Mac, I'm running Windows in a separate area. So you can see that where was I going with this? Oh, yeah, I was going to show you the register, and the register has all this information in it from 2017. All of this was directly imported from Quicken. I set this up maybe about 2 weeks ago and just brought all this information over. So it's very robust in terms of moving from Quicken to QuickBooks. Any other questions? Okay, well, Dave has posted a link to the evaluation form for this class in the chat. Please click on that or copy it and save it. Fill out that form. It's a Google form that you just submit online. It will go to whoever is coordinating this, who will then summarize it and then give feedback to the instructors about what you liked, didn't like, all of those normal things that we do on evaluation forms. But it really does help us going forward. I think the important thing here is to be honest about how you felt participating in a virtual learning experience like this. Because some districts are making the decision to do this forever to save costs, and other districts are saying, no, we really do want to have the ongoing physical meetings when we can. So your feedback in that area will be very important to people who are making those decisions. With that, Steve?
Sorry, I feel like I'm dominating here, but going back about record storage, how long do we need to be hanging on to, especially paper records? I mean, I've got a stack in the corner of my office that's getting unbearable. I know for IRS purposes, like what, 7 years, but
7 years is usually a good rule of thumb for almost everything. There are some things you can get rid of after 2 or 3 years, and there is a record retention guide in the Treasurer's Manual. So you can take a look at that. But 7 years is a good rule of thumb. The only exception to that is if you have some kind of ongoing contract that maybe is beyond that. I don't know what it would be, but maybe you had a written contract with your director that was entered into 10 years ago, and all you've done is change the amount on an annual basis, but the contract terms are the same year after year. Well, you need to keep that contract, obviously, because it's still in force. But generally speaking, any type of transactional record, 7 years is a good rule of thumb. But if you are looking to save more space than that, take a look at the records retention issue in the Treasurer's Manual.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, I think that brings us to the end of our session. I thank you all for coming today, for participating, and I hope this was helpful to you.
I'm going to chime in and thank John so much for spending your time with JD and some Cardinal folks, and everybody on this call. Thanks so much for continuing to increase your education and help your chapters and let the district move forward in a legal and safe way. So thanks for that. Don't forget the evaluation. And hope to see some of you this afternoon on the post-COVID class, which I think will be pretty intriguing. With that, I'm going to end the session. Going once, going
Thanks,
twice.
everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Dave.